And on this 8th day of January 2018, good evening once again from our NBC News headquarters here in New York. Day 354 of the Trump administration brings reports of what could be an extraordinary moment in the Russia investigation. It appears President Trump faces the very real possibility of being interviewed as part of the Russia investigation being run by Robert Mueller. NBC News broke the story, a reporting team that included our own Julia Ainsley, who will join us in just a moment. They write that according to their sources, lawyers for Trump have been talking to FBI investigators about a possible interview by the special counsel with the president. Our NBC News colleagues also report this, quote, the president's legal team is discussing a range of potential options for the format, including written responses to questions in lieu of a formal sit-down, according to three people familiar with the matter. The discussions were described by one person with direct knowledge as preliminary and ongoing. We'll talk about that in a bit as well. Other news organizations have also been reporting on this development, notably the Washington Post, which writes, quote, special counsel Robert Mueller has told President Trump's legal team that his office is likely to seek an interview with the president, triggering a discussion among his attorneys about how to avoid a sit-down encounter or set limits on such a session, according to two people familiar with the talks. This weekend, the question of what the president was willing to do regarding such an interview came up during a news conference at Camp David.
If Robert Mueller asks you to come and speak with his committee personally, are you committed still to doing that? Do you believe that?
Just so you understand, there's been no collusion. There's been no crime. And in theory, everybody tells me I'm not under investigation. Maybe Hillary is, I don't know, but I'm not.
Today, White House counsel John Dowd said this in a statement given to us at NBC News, quote, the White House does not comment on communications with the Office of Special Counsel out of respect for the Office of Special Counsel and its process. The White House is continuing its full cooperation with the Office of Special Counsel in order to facilitate the earliest possible resolution. The prospect of the president testifying under oath and answering questions on the fly, that is likely to cause great anxiety for members of his legal team. You will note the effort by fellow Republicans in recent weeks to discredit the special prosecutor and sow doubt of any kind about the Russia investigation. Here is what Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, said today.
I think Mr. Mueller should be able to do his job without being interfered with. The bottom line is we can't let anybody be above the law. You got the Trump Tower meeting where Don Jr. and a bunch of other people are meeting with several Russians. Right. They're offering to help. We have yet to find out if they took up that offer, but I think Mueller should look at that.
Tough to get a read on Lindsey Graham these days. Our leadoff panel on a Monday night, the aforementioned Julia Ainsley, NBC News national security and justice reporter, Philip Rucker, White House bureau chief for the Washington Post and an MSNBC political analyst, and attorney Nick Ackerman, former Watergate special prosecutor, now an MSNBC legal analyst. Good evening to you all. Happy New Year to you all. And Julia, I note that you and members of our team have started 2018 where you left off 2017, and that's by breaking stories. Let's talk about this latest one. My question to you is, what do we know about what the Mueller team wants to get out of this and what the Trump team would like to get out of this or avoid?
That's a great way to break it down, Brian, because when you look at what the Trump legal team wants, it wants what most defense teams would want, and that is to keep their client from ever speaking to the prosecution or for having to incriminate themselves in a court setting. The difference here is that their client is the president of the United States, so he can't just plead the fifth because politically that looks very bad and it looks like he has something to hide. But they don't want him to have a kind of carte blanche interview where he can be asked anything. And, you know, with the way this president tends to be very unfiltered, he could incriminate himself. So they want to try to rail that back. The one thing, though, that, of course, we have to think about on the other side is the Mueller team. Mueller is a very thorough investigator. He leaves no stone unturned, and he is going to want to sit down with President Trump and be able to read body language, cues, pauses in the conversation, anything that might indicate whether or not he's being truthful or might be kind of bending some of the words. If he gets written responses like these lawyers lawyers are suggesting. He's going to basically be getting something that has been very neatly combed over by legal minds and not coming from the president himself, which would not be as authentic.
Nick, I have so many questions for you, some of which we can plow through in a lightning round.
Sure.
Number one, do you concur that he probably can't say no?
I don't think he can say no. Politically, he has to go through with this. He has to testify.
Number two, talk about format. You and I were talking just before the broadcast. You think it could be that Mueller and or Mueller's team come over to the White House, use a conference room with a court reporter, meaning a transcript, but maybe not video?
Oh, I don't know about a video, but certainly they would try and recreate what would be in a grand jury. A video is normally not used in a grand jury setting. But I think what they would do is insist that this be under oath, that there be a transcript, that there be questions and answers that are transcribed. The idea of there being simply questions asked or that he submit statements in response to questions later on, I mean, they are looking for certain pieces of evidence, admissible evidence that they can use in this investigation to either say there was no conspiracy or there was a conspiracy. And they certainly aren't going to be hemmed in and prevented from actually following through and questioning the most important person in this entire investigation.
Let's talk about this president. He is used to holding court. He's used to back and forth with journalists. People forget what an entertainer he is. He likes to command attention, make people laugh in a room. He is not used to having to answer questions on the fly like this. Talk about the degree of exposure with this president who won't have the benefit of knowing what Flynn and Manafort have already told Mueller's team.
Well, we know certainly that Flynn has cooperated. He's told them a lot about his meetings with Trump. Trump's lawyers certainly don't know what was said because Trump, you can be certain, has not told his lawyers the truth about what he did or didn't do. He probably doesn't even remember half of what he told Flynn. And what the Mueller team is going to do is they're going to go through very methodically all of the conversations that Flynn has told them about, all of the instances that Flynn has told them about, areas where they can corroborate what Flynn has said, either through documents or through tapes that they have or wiretaps. They're going to be able to go through all of that, none of which the defense will have. So there is a real minefield here that Mueller is clearly going to take advantage of and should take advantage of.
Phil Rucker, I cannot imagine a more harrowing set of circumstances where exposure, legal exposure for this president and his team is concerned. What's your read on the level of concern?
The level of concern, I think, is quite high, Brian. According to the reporting out today, including by Julia and her colleagues at NBC, that's a great scoop, by the way, Trump is eager to participate. He wants to show that he did nothing wrong. But there's tremendous risk here for him. You know as well as I do that this is a president who states falsehoods, who sometimes lies all the time. He rarely gets through a media interview without saying something that's factually inaccurate. And so for him to sit down and have a lengthy, sort of free-flowing conversation with Mueller under oath, transcribed, there's tremendous danger that he might say something that is simply not true or that does not add up with what other witnesses in this investigation have said.
Julia, you know how much I love walking you up to the edge of what you're happy to report. And here's tonight's question on that front. What have you learned about what this means for the Mueller timeline, that they're indeed saying to Team Trump, hey, we're going to want to talk to your client?
That's a great question. That's something I've been kind of asking myself tonight, because one piece of reporting that the Washington Post had that was not in our original story is the fact that this is going to come potentially in the coming weeks. That's something that we're still digging into, Brian. But if that is the case, that really could put a faster timeline on this investigation than a lot of us were expecting, because I even think Nick would probably agree with this, that is one of the pieces that you would do kind of as a capstone at the end of an investigation like this, because you're not going to be able to go back to the president after you learn something else. This is something you do after you have your pieces in a row.
Counselor, you agree with that?
I agree with it only to the extent that I think what they've got now is Michael Flynn's testimony. Michael Flynn is a super insider here. He was with the president during the campaign. He was with the president after he was inaugurated. He knows a lot. And it seems to me that they know that the only other person that they have here that may know more than Michael Flynn is going to be Manafort. Manafort's not cooperating. They still have to convict him, try him, convict him, and then get him to cooperate. But I think what they want to do at this point in time is take advantage of the fact that they have all of this information from Michael Flynn. I think that's where we are. It still doesn't mean that this investigation won't go on for a while, that there won't be the Manafort prosecution, ultimate conviction, and then cooperation, which may ultimately lead to more indictments. But I think they're at a very key crossroads right now with the Flynn cooperation.
If I'm Team Mueller, I want to show the grand jury video, especially of this president and all that his answers entail physically. You can see anger, you can see nervousness that a readback of a transcript doesn't get you. Is that the kind of thing that'll be horse traded back and forth, a concession that maybe someone will make?
Possibly, but I think part of the problem with that is that normally you don't have videotapes before a grand jury, that you don't have the witnesses themselves be videotaped. Now, what you're pointing out is that, well, the grand jurors aren't going to be able to see him, and so maybe they should have a videotape of what goes on here, and that wouldn't be unusual. I mean, I think you're going to have some trading here as to how the process is going to work, but I think the bottom line is that Mueller is going to insist that there be a transcript, that it be under oath, and that it be ancillary to the grand jury, and make that very clear at the outset of the questioning.
Phil Rucker, on the degrees of concern, what do you think is more worrisome inside Team Trump, this book, the Wolf Book, or the continuing worry over Russia?
Well, Brian, certainly the continuing worry over Russia is a cloud that's hung over this presidency really all year and could continue to hang through most of next year. But the portrait in this book is really devastating of this president, in particular the portrayal of his mental facility, his mental acuity, his fitness for office. There are real doubts in this book revealed through a number of interviews with alleged interviews with Trump insiders about how this president conducts his business, and it's a real concern in the White House. They've struggled all week, including today, to try to contain what has become a national conversation about the president's mental health.
What is also, as we mentioned, the subject of an article in the Washington Post tonight. Phil, I saved something for you. I want to show you and our viewers part of the president's appearance today before a farming convention in Tennessee. He went there relitigating the election results.
Oh, are you happy you voted for me? You are so lucky that I gave you that privilege. You remember? There is no way to 270, and there wasn't. We got 306 or 304. There was no way to 270. We ended up with 304. After two were taken away from us somehow. I don't know how that one. We had 306, then it ended up being 304. You'll explain that to me someday.
Phil, do you think the members of the Farm Bureau gathered in Nashville were interested in the final electoral vote count?
Oh, that's a good point, Brian. First of all, the election was more than a year ago. But second of all, this was not a political campaign rally. It was a convention of the American Farm Bureau. And he was there as the president, as the commander-in-chief, to give what was supposed to be an agriculture policy speech. So that was not a political environment, but he made it so, in part because the president thinks about his campaign victory all the time. We're now in year two now after the election.
He does wear his electoral votes on his sleeve. Our thanks to Julia Ainsley, to Philip Rucker, to Nick Ackerman for starting us off on a Monday night in January. We really appreciate it. Thank you to all of you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.